without further ado, I'd love to welcome Wynne Brown. And I had the pleasure of working with Wynne years ago at Monster. And I can say I slept well at night because Wynne was on the revenue engine and building a team that produced really world-class results. And over the past 15 years or so, I've seen her be sales and customer success from 0 to 100 million multiple times at top B2B companies like Seal Software, which was acquired by DocuSign, GitHub, Coupa, and she's currently head of revenue for Fable in the Village portfolio. And she's leading customer experience from prospect through success. And just a funny background is Wynne's resume was posted in Nexus, our online hub. And I must tell you, that was one very clicked link because she brings the kind of skills that are just so valuable early stage. So without further ado, welcome Wynne.
Hi, Anne. Wow, I hope everybody gets that kind of intro once in their life. Thank you so much.
Okay, well, let's dive into the heart of the matter. How should founders think about their first sales hire?
Yeah, so the first sales hire is so critical. And you are truly looking for kind of what we used to call the purple squirrel, right, in recruiting, where you really want to find a lone wolf who's collaborative. You want to find, if at all possible, somebody who has done it before, been the first before, because what you want that person to do is be voracious and hungry to land deals, but also have the collaborative mindset where they really care about creating what's repeatable and scalable. You want somebody who's going to really glean the lessons and basically help you build out that playbook. You can most likely find that through your own network, sometimes through a recruiter. You just want to really interview a lot of people who have something on paper about being the first, but then make sure they click with you, because as a founder, if you can't correct them, get feedback from them, work with them in that collaborative way, you will waste a lot of time.
And is there any trigger you've seen that it's time to move from founder-led sales to first hire?
Yeah, it's funny. Founders have to wear a lot of hats. I'm actually advising a very early stage founder right now who's doing all of the things, and we're really talking about that. So when do you step off from doing that? When you have about 10 customers, you're going to start to feel that pinch of what happens to those customers. You're going to want to start to think about all the other mechanics you have to put in place to make sure that, you reference the leaky bucket, that you're keeping as much revenue as possible. You as the founder have to start thinking about so many other areas of the business that's kind of a tipping point. You don't want to underserve your first prospects. Those early adopters make or break you in a lot of ways. So just really start to pay attention to when you feel that pinch and pull in other areas. Honestly, the sooner the better you buy that first seller, and you can survive for quite some time with that very ideal first hire in sales.
Great. And then most of the best sellers in the world are gainfully employed at any given time. So how does a startup attract a really good sales leader?
Yeah. What's really most important for you as a founder, and certainly for this first hire as well, is you have to know what makes you special. What is the big hook? Is it that you are the first mover, as and going for enterprise because you're creating a new category? Is it that you figured out a way to optimize the deal flow? Is it that you have certain advisors who can pull in leads that are extraordinary? You really need to know what is the hook. If you don't know that yet, you got to collaborate with your other staff that you have, with your great resources like at Village Global, and really figure out what makes us special, what makes us stand apart. And honestly, the thing that can make you stand apart is if you offer somebody a path where they see already from those first customers you landed as a founder to making a lot of money. You want your sellers to be greedy. You absolutely want them to see a path to making a great deal of money. And we're going to talk a little bit more about how you incent them to keep them on track so that the money they're making serves you, the customer, and your company in the long run, because swim lanes for sellers is of the utmost importance.
Awesome. Okay. So I know this founder's chomping the bit about thinking about sales compensation, but before we get there, let's stay on recruiting salespeople.
Yep.
So salespeople are hard to interview because they sell pretty well. So do you have any interview tips, sample questions? Do you give a project to sellers before you hire them?
Yeah. So the first and foremost thing I think is really important is that the interview process is the job, right? So sellers are in the business of selling. You know, quite some time ago when I was running a very early stage sales team and doing a lot of hiring, I actually did an Easter egg. And I never like to do gotchas, but what I did was I wrote an article on LinkedIn. It's all about like how to get the job. Literally said, when you come and try and get an interview with me, if you're interviewing with me, reference this article on LinkedIn, because my expectation when I'm hiring sellers is that they're going to do the research. So I'm not a huge fan of gotchas. That was younger when maybe I wouldn't do that now necessarily. But I do want to be very explicit with them about my expectations. So when I do have, right now we're doing a lot of recruiting, very high growth. And so my partners in HR, we will set up a very explicit agenda. I don't do projects, but I do give them a task. What I want to know from them is what was their favorite mistake. This is my favorite interview question. I want to know what their favorite mistake is, because one of the most universal needs at early stage companies is a growth mindset. And we have to be able to make mistakes, make them once, and learn from them. And so I want to know that somebody really has embraced what they like, their biggest mistake. I want them to come to the interview excited to share that, not like, oh, but I'll never do it again. You want somebody who's going to, I don't want to be cliched or anything, but be willing to like break things and learn from that and move past that. Yeah.
And
so,
can I
so, and
clarify?
by, yeah, go ahead. I was
Wait,
going
can
to
I
say, and
clarify?
by,
On the LinkedIn post that was if somebody hadn't done their homework and hadn't found your obvious post about what to do and talk about it, that was a fail, right? Because they didn't prep.
Yeah, I was just about to say, like, that was a fail, and it did feel like a little bit of too much of a tricky kind of gotcha. Again, I've learned from my mistake, which is like the job isn't about, I didn't want the relationship with my sellers of kind of like that they thought I was testing them, right? And so now we're much more explicit about what they should prepare. There's also, really incredible resources if you're scaling very quickly, especially if, let's say that you're on the SMB side or the mid-market side and you need more people to do higher volume. So it's a little less of a kind of sophisticated, so to speak, or complex multi-threaded sale like an enterprise. If you need to do that rapid hiring of a lot of bodies, recruiters are great to use. There is a story that I have of one of my mistakes. Again, I embrace mistakes. I want to share as many kind of stories. I'm going to like anonymize them to protect the innocent. But when I was at this kind of early stage startup and hiring a lot of SMB and mid-market reps, we worked with a recruiter. We had a few really successful hires. We had one who, and we're still friends to this day, but he was a young person. He was partying a lot. Like, he came to work and fell asleep at his desk. And I saw the impact on the other sellers, and I kind of fired him on the spot. It was just unacceptable. And, it really felt I was acting out of protection for my other folks. Big mistake, because we still owed the recruiting fees. And if I had called the recruiter and said, so-and-so is falling asleep at his desk, can you recall him? We would have gotten, a replacement for that recruiting slot. So it was a costly mistake that I only made once. But read the fine print if you're working with recruiters.
Amazing. Okay. So let's get tactical. What have you learned about setting sales quota and sales compensation?
Okay. This is, I think, just the most important topic, because salespeople are like water down the face of a rock. Like, they will find every crevice, they will find every game to play to make the most money. And you want that. Your responsibility as the founder or the sales leader is to really think about what are those cracks in the face of the rock, and how can I incentivize the right behavior and disincentivize the wrong behavior. So here's an example. At a recent startup, it was a land and expand model, which is very typical for enterprise, right? And we did not have any distinction between land and expand for our sellers. We had enterprise, very complex, multi-threaded sellers. There was no distinction in the incentive plan between land and expand. So we went a full 4 quarters without any new logos. They were all just hanging in the pocket of, I can just keep selling to a major bank headquartered in California, and just keep selling and meet and exceed target, because the target was just a general number. So just a little story to emphasize how important it is to really like almost like game theory out kind of what would happen if this, then that for your comp plans. To create a comp plan, the most important thing is the basic core principle. What is the job? So is the job to drive new logos? Is the job to grow revenue? Is the job, if you're a BDR, to create sales accepted leads? And then make sure that the compensation is translated into really rewarding people for their great and excellent work. So for example, if you have a BDR, what sometimes happens is we reward them for what they could maybe estimate is the dollar value of those sales, but that's not their core job. Their core job is to drive the top of that funnel. And so, what I think is right for BDRs is the number of SALs, of sales accepted leads, so that we're really measuring like what's the most important for that role, the volume, and then make it very simple, right? So you've got the core mission that that person needs to deliver for your company, and then make it simple. If they can't hold their comp plan in their head and know if I sell $1 of MRR, I make $1. Something simple like that, that makes business sense for your company. That's the way to really incent salespeople.
I think that's so smart. I remember, and maybe it was a conversation we had, but we actually talked about how would you game this compensation plan, and put it out there, right? Like, well, we could have
Yeah.
low quality stuff, and it's funny because once you have it out there, it does kind of disarm it. It changes the conversation.
Well, I'm totally laughing because Anne, I actually gamed the comp plan when we were together.
Oh
This was like
no!
17 years ago when I was doing this selling for Anne. It was actually 16 years ago because there's this amazing spiff. And my team was a unique team at Monster where we had like massive, massive deals. And I was pregnant with my first child, and no, it was my second child. And the spiff forgot about me. And so it was basically I could pay for like a year of maternity leave just performing. So be careful. Like you'll have people like me who are going to figure out how can I make the big bucks. And usually they had, put me to the side for different spiffs. But anyway, it all worked out great for everyone.
That's good. That's good. Okay, and then how do you think about setting sales targets and
Yeah.
how they relate to revenue growth?
Yeah, and actually this wraps into kind of how you compensate as well as like what is the target you're going to compensate on. When you're young, as a startup, it's really amazing to just have 6-month plans because you don't know what's going to happen. If you all of a sudden, release a second product, the ACV hopefully for your deals is going to go up. So you're going to be doing all of these experiments, and the last thing you want to do is overcompensate your salespeople, or even worse is to undercompensate them. I mean, when we are trying to get momentum and get early customers, paying your salespeople a lot is a good thing. When you have 6-month plans, though, you're able to make, just real different choices midstream, and nobody's disappointed. Anytime you want to change a comp plan, it'll feel like you're yanking the rug out. So just set the expectation that it's 6 months. When we look at setting targets, you hopefully at this point have a model as a young company of what revenue you would expect or aim for. And so it's a little bit of a combo where I like to go kind of top down from the model, like what is the revenue that my founders have promised to the board. This is our trajectory for the next year, 2 years, 3 years. And we'll set targets based on that. But then we'll also foot it to kind of what is reasonable for our sellers. So if I look at the model and I say, oh, for example, at Fable, we're in the enterprise space. And if we have, just making up numbers for conversation, if every seller should deliver 2 or 3 deals a month, then if I'm looking at the top-down model and it's demanding 7 deals a month, then there's something amiss there. And so there's lots of conversation that needs to happen. The most important thing is making sure that what targets you set are achievable. That doesn't mean that everybody would achieve them, but if everybody does great work, they all can. I'm not one to pad numbers and set up an expectation that X number of my sellers will fail. That's just not who I am as a leader. Some companies choose to do that and have kind of like the buffers, right, for each level of sales management. I like to be very direct and explicit with folks about what our expectations are and how it adds up to our company's success.
Got it. And do you work on a bottoms up plan with team members to say how many deals, average ACV or something like that?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, this goes along with kind of that idea of you have to be able to hold your comp plan in your mind. To me, that also means like if I'm a seller, if I'm an individual contributor, which I sat in that seat for quite some time, I want to know if I sit down and if I, every month, because that's kind of how we look at this, every month, if I'm getting from my BDRs X number of opportunities, I'm going to watch my funnel progression, make sure that I have enough deals that are flowing through so that the past months that I did that, that I am closing X number of deals a month. I want it to be a very simple metric, and rely on my leadership to say, hey, you're only selling one of our two products or two of our five products. So your ACV is low. How can we work on that? And that's really when we talk about, first sales hire, then we hire a head of sales and hire more sellers. And then we start to have these layers of management. Hiring those managers is everything for that sales culture. What are they going to emphasize? How are they going to help people? How are they going to make sure that as many people are achieving that target as possible?
Great. So let's transition a little bit to the sales software stack for early stage startups. So you've been through this evolution many times. You're doing it now, I think, with the Fable team. So what would you recommend? And Wynne is not being endorsed by any of these products, but feel free to make specific recommendations. And
Okay, great. Yeah, and again, predicating this on your stack's only as good as your planning, your methodology, your people. So, you can survive as very, very early startup on just an Excel sheet. But as far as CRMs go, I was a Salesforce user for years and years. We're now using HubSpot. I think it's amazing. When you're early stage for your sales leadership, you want them to have a lot of kind of command and control to be able to look at data however they want. And HubSpot just enables you to do that in a really great way. Really great, obvious integrations across kind of marketing. So you can really see that whole customer journey from kind of all the attribution of touch from marketing through into the CRM and the sales process itself. I really think of it as the stack for early stage as how you do your work and how you document your work. So for my CRM, I'm using HubSpot. Huge fan of Confluence for documentation. I know there are other really great ones, like I've seen Notion, and that seems really great too. But we happen to be, a Jira shop, and so Confluence is really terrific. However you want to do that, though, the most important thing is when you know that something's working, document the heck out of it. Like write down the actual steps. Playbooks and this whole idea of creativity in sales, I believe in, but when something's working, you want to rinse repeat. We're trying to create, repeatable processes with predictable outcomes. That's the whole game early stage. So, what I want always to do too is to capture what works, and then humans can do what only humans can do. So in other words, like the CRM, let the CRM do the work, let it do the math for your, for weighting your deals based on probability of close, and let the humans do what only humans can do, talk with people to try and sell them.
great. And do you have any perspective on like lead sources or lead qualification tools or anything you've heard good things about or not?
It's very frothy. There's so many different tools there we use Apollo, we use Clearbit. Like there's lots of different ways to kind of clean up data. And I'm not the expert on that. Like I very much lean on our marketing team to create that very top of the funnel for us. So it's not necessarily my forte to comment on that. And I am, this is 20 years of startups, so I am kind of old school tools in some ways and old fashioned. Like we use LinkedIn Sales Navigator to do lots of research. We at Fable are pretty blessed with some really, really positive and productive inbound. And so outbound's something we're just starting to stand up in a really thoughtful and strategic way. And it's exciting to be able to look out there in the world and say, who do we think we can benefit?
Great. Okay, so let's move to pricing. How should you think about pricing early stage, and maybe whether you think about per seat or usage-based pricing, flat fees? Any insights there?
Yeah, so everything, right, when SaaS started, everything was a seat, right? Everything was a seat, and then SMB came in and was like, okay, so we do this freemium model, and we can do it monthly, and we'll only bill on usage and all of those things. The thing that's most important is to really understand what's the value in your product and make people pay on that. So for example, at CL Software, we didn't care about number of seats because we were never going to sell to a lot of seats. We sold based on the number of documents in a repository because that was what was valuable to our customers. As far as like trying to figure out pricing is always like your best guess. If you're not getting pushback on pricing from the market, you're pricing too low. If you don't get pushback, though, it might be that you're the only one doing it and people really value it. And so it can feel very tricky. The best feedback is to make sure you have like a good closed loop with your sellers on what the areas of pushback are. Are people just expecting a discount? There's lots of ways to probe for that, and you've got to, and that's another reason for these, like the 6-month plans for compensation. If you are going to have some price adjustments up or down, you want to be able to adjust likely targets up and down as well. One trap that I wanted to make sure to mention is something that a lot of early stage companies thinks is really positive, but you want to be very careful with, which is auto renewals. So auto renewals sound great because you're going to make sure that customer is kind of always coming back to you unless they remember their clause. To me, it's kind of like that article I wrote on LinkedIn. Like, it's a little bit of a trap. It's a trap though for you too. You're not just like, oh, great, we're going to have these customers who have to stay with us. You never want a customer to have to stay with you, right? Because of something contractual. Auto renewals also block you in many ways from being able to raise price or negotiate in further years. So I'm a big fan of 2-year deals. I'm not a big fan of auto renewal. I'm a big fan of multi-year deals that have stepped up pricing. So I just wanted to make sure to mention that as well. The other tip that I wanted to mention is publish a price book. So the best way to slow down negotiations is for your sellers to have to come back to the head of sales or the founder or whoever to keep asking, can I do it for this? Can I do it for that? Can I do it for this? So if you publish, even if you just have one product, publish a price book that has the limits for where they can negotiate to, so that it just streamlines that process a great deal.
Got it. So that's published internally.
Only internally.
Okay, got it.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah. If you are on the SMB side, you're probably going to have published pricing per seat or per unit, whatever your appropriate unit for selling is, on your website. Once you get into mid-market, likely you're going to start to look at maybe not publishing, but when you're a custom pricing enterprise, you're never going to have your pricing on your website. It's so conditional based on what is the situation, what is the kind of footprint that they're going to start at, who is the brand, is it worth investing in that brand by doing a discount? Enterprise pricing, typically you're never going to show that externally until it's in a proposal and it's just that one price they're seeing.
Right. And should founders worry about setting precedents in early pricing?
Yes. Yes. So what's really interesting, and I've seen this evolution over, I'd say the past 10 years, is that some brands that one doesn't think necessarily as highly innovative are early adopters of technology. I won't name names, but I'll say like a top 5 retailer in the world is a very, very progressive company that tries every new software out there that might fit into their stack. So it can be very dangerous to set too low of a price because you're creating an expectation that will live almost like generationally in the minds of that outfit. There's a lot. Here's what I would say too. If you are very confident that you're going to offer growth in your number of products and a real change in your value, then I wouldn't worry as much about setting a precedent. If you're more of a commodity where it is maybe just a rinse repeat and you can't build a very profound moat around what you're offering, then precedent's going to matter a lot more.
Got it. What have you learned about pitching an early stage product that may be incomplete or can change with customer input? Because these are evolving products you're pitching.
Yeah. So honesty, like I don't know if we've all, like I have, unfortunately been involved in, I think, just one startup that was just vaporware. Like the sellers would say stuff. I mean, I came in at that when I was the head of customer success and support, and I walked into it wasn't what I expected. Let's put it that way. Mildly, it was not what I expected. Because you cannot undo those promises that are not going to come true. So honesty about your roadmap and honesty about what is offered, and what will be offered is essential. The other thing that is really a kind of a sand trap as you develop is that you want to put on your roadmap things that benefit more than one customer. If it's one major customer, you're going to start to think in the very early days, like, oh, I've got to do this for Acme Co. because Acme Co. can make me. Acme Co. is not going to make your company in the long run, not even close. And if you keep promising them things that are only good for Acme Co., you're going to end up dedicating so many resources to that one specific need that it will take you, kind of veer you off. Instead of a curve like that, you're going to like flatten your curve dramatically. Every red button request costs you a lot. And so, we, at one of my past startups, we did that. So we had some hurdles with security concerns so that financial services companies couldn't come in the cloud with us. And so we started doing on-prem. And when you start doing on-prem, you start getting into all of these other asks. And so it became kind of a death march of PS, where everything got really bogged down and really difficult because we said yes too many times to things that weren't going to be core to that roadmap.
Got it. Okay, let's move a little bit to customer success. And I credit you. I think you were the first person who actually used the term customer success. At least I'd never heard it before. So when do you think about customer success? And what are the favorite interview questions to bring somebody in to think about, to run that?
Yeah. So it used to be the customer success was a bit of an afterthought. Like you said, like people discover that they have a leaky bucket and here they have hundreds of customers and then they start thinking about really how to service them. So, I would say once you have a good stable of like even 15 customers, it's really important to bring somebody in. And it could be somebody who spans across sales and customer success to think about how you really service them. With SMB, most of the time, your customer success is going to be more automated, more low to no touch. Um, Mid-market up to enterprise where it's super white glove, very high touch. No matter where you are on that spectrum, you have to know the moments that make or break your customer. And it could be as simple as like, okay, onboarding. If they don't do these 3 things in their first month, they will stop using. To know how the value is delivered for your product and then to put into place some machine, and that machine can be part automation and part human, all automation, all human, but somehow there's a process through which you know what's happening with those customers and there's guidance to get them back on track. So it really is this kind of journey map of when you onboard a new customer to kind of what does success look like. So bringing success leadership in as soon as possible, because creating that machine takes a lot of thoughtfulness, a lot of work. And that's why I think now companies wisely are starting that much earlier. So you're not fixing problems, you're just having people go down that correct journey. Yeah. And then to interview people, to interview people, a lot of people do a great crossover from sales to success. So you don't need somebody who's necessarily had a success experience before. It's best, of course, but the thing that you want to really understand about that person is what's driving them. What drives the best customer success people are relationships. It is all about putting themselves in the shoes of that customer and really driving the best outcomes possible through collaboration. When we were together, and like the best compliment I've ever gotten in my career was a customer of ours saying they thought I was on their team more than I was on your team because I was advocating for them. And knowing what the customer needs to do is everything. And so relationships really matter.
Right. And I think that was the key distinction that I learned from you, which is customer support is like answering a call or an email when somebody reaches out to you. Customer success is delivering for them, like delivering results. So you become essential, right?
Yeah, and that is actually the biggest mistake that's still happening everywhere is that success becomes reactive. Support should be reactive, as you just described, where somebody's coming in, they have a ticket, they have a problem, they have a bug, they can't log in, they need spot help reactively from your company. So success actually should be, the best metaphor I heard is the conductor of an orchestra. They themselves will become more and more domain expert and cover off on a lot of the mechanics of what a customer needs to do. But what they're really doing is calling in the right resources at the right time, including themselves, to orchestrate success. And one thing that is amazing to me that more people don't do it because it's common sense, it's common knowledge, but it's all about execution. Execution is the thing that predicts whether a company succeeds or not. And that is success plans. When you get a customer, and this is more for mid-market to enterprise where you're having a human relationship, you get a customer, they've dreamt a dream. They came to you and bought from you because they want to succeed at something. Maybe that champion themselves thinks, this is my path to promotion. Maybe it's mission critical for their company's objectives for the year. But they have a very clear sense of what they need to do to get done. What are the outputs? And a success plan is a simple external facing document. It is one page. It says, for this year, these are our objectives. and here's how we're going to get there. And that's, then there's a huge thing about like an action plan that comes off of that and all that. But this one simple document means that your champion can go to their leadership and say, here's what we're doing. Here's what we achieved. And every year you have a new one. So hopefully you end up with like many, many pages of the success plan. But just last summer when I was transitioning my own roles, I consulted for an amazing company. They're incredible. And they had me come in to just like, what was the missing magic for their success organization? And I came in and did a lot around methodology, but I said, really, it's this one page. It's a success plan. And they just leap of faith said, okay, we're going to try it. And they tried it with their biggest brands. And all of these folks around the world came back and said, their eyes lit up. They knew that we knew what they needed to get done, and they were reassured that we would get it done. So it's this very simple thing. Everybody kind of knows they should do it, but it's the difference between good and great.
Awesome. And then how do you think about org structure and who sales, marketing, customer success, analytics, maybe how should these marketing, how should they interact and report?
Yeah, so I'm a huge fan of like ripping out old school stuff and making companies really customer centric. So there have to be like these reporting lines, right? And I believe that there should be like a CMO. Some marketing is such a broad and vast and deep practice that I don't love this whole CRO idea of having marketing under CROs. So CMO, kind of that's top of the funnel, right? And then I like what I'm doing, right? Which is that you have one leader who understands both the pre-sale new logo sales, post-sale sales, as well as the customer success arc over that. So that you have somebody who really is tending to that entire journey from top of the funnel, the handoff from marketing, all the way through to the ongoing delivery of value. PS kind of lives in a different little org, but what I really am aiming to do, and we're embracing it really well right now where I work currently, is this idea of the customer journey dictates the resourcing. It's not that you change what you're doing, it's you change how you think about it. So here's a story that illustrates it. So at a former company, we had a PS team that from day one of the customer engagement, the customers hated us because the PS team would show up without a timeline. Because it was for them, it was all about their resourcing and they were going to do it when they could get to it. And it was not at all about the customer. Try and think of your customer journey as like, I'm the customer. What do I want out of this interaction? So even like sales stages, like is the sales stage trust building? We as the sellers are trying to build trust with our prospects, but the prospect doesn't think of it like that. They think of it like we're evaluating, we're trying to see what value there is if we make this purchase. So thinking of each touch point in the customer journey, and then whoever from whatever silo, from marketing, from sales, from PS, from support, they come in maybe together at that touch point to make sure the customer is achieving what they want to achieve throughout their whole journey. So it's kind of like a 90-degree pivot of how we look at things, but it keeps silos from being built, keeps us out of the blame game between marketing and sales because we're just focused on what the customer needs at that point.
Got it. And PS equals
professional
pre-sales?
services.
Oh,
professional services. Yeah,
oh, okay,
sorry.
good. Glad
acronyms.
Great. Okay. And then I want to open it up to bring some questions, but what's your favorite new idea you've implemented at Fable?
I'm going to say 3. I can't choose one. One is we trashed BANT and MEDIC and MEDPIC or whichever. Like we have our own acronyms for our sales methodology. They're very similar, but it's really important as you think of, and these just to orient people, sales methodology acronyms, right? We need to know for each point in the sales process, each stage, what's the gate I have to get through? How do I earn my way out of it? And so you have to have again, hold it in your mind, something really clear and easy to remember, that if the lead or the prospect doesn't meet these standards, they can't progress. And we have to do more work, or we say, no, we're not a great fit for you. Don't waste your time with these prospects. The other thing I love was I have a solutions I'm designing a solutions expert to span the whole sales process from prospect all the way through. So not a sales engineer that really focuses just on pre-sales, but somebody who can be a domain expert and dive bomb in across the entire customer journey. And the last thing I love, it'll come back to kind of one of the stories I told. I have a post-sales AE. So instead of having my AEs try and straddle the fence of like new logos versus expansion sales, I have new logo sellers. All they focus on is new logo sales. And then I have a post-sales AE that does renewals and growth so that everybody's very clear again on their like very laser focused mission that they're on. So
Wonderful.
it was 3. I broke the rules. Sorry.
No, wonderful. Okay, good. And I think we have a question.
Great.
So we're going to bring Tony up. And Tony, please introduce yourself.
Hi,
question.
Tony.
Hi there. I'm a co-founder and head of engineering at Mesh. Nice to meet you all. It's been very informative so far. I know you've touched on compensation, variable compensation a little bit. Our situation is we're super early stage. We're still exploring product market fit and what are the right customer profiles to go for. So I wonder if we can go a little bit deeper on how you structure variable compensation. Like our candidates are looking for that, but we don't really know what the product market fit and the customer profiles are.
So are you actively selling yourself right now?
Yes, we have early revenue, founder-led sales. We're driving leads. We're just not quite sure how to structure the variable comp.
Yeah. So a couple things. Do you have a good sense from your early sales, like what a target might be? Like in the next, even if we just say 3 months, because right now it sounds like without the product market fit, without a target customer profile, you're in a really like murky area, right? It's clear as mud kind of how to do this. And
Very
so do you have a sense?
exploratory.
Yeah. And so do you have a sense of what the next 3 months might look like?
Yes.
Okay. So if you know that, let's just say, X number of dollars are going to be generated, a good rule of thumb is a 10 to 15% commission rate. Like if you're an enterprise, are you a mid-market to enterprise?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah. So if you just need a quick and dirty rule of thumb, 10 to 15%.
Okay.
That is a really good mark for your first sellers. Ultimately, again, you just want them to make a really nice amount of money. If you have the murkiness that you described, which you're going to figure out pretty quickly, I'm hopeful for you. Again, if you overpay your first seller, that is not a problem, right? You need somebody who's going to come in, be very, very risk friendly, swing for the fences, compensate them, but retain your own power of saying this is even a 3-month plan or a 6-month plan. Do not do an annual plan.
Great.
Okay. Got it.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Thanks so much, Tony. Okay, and we have Mode as well.
Hi, Wynne.
Hi.
Thank you so much for such an informative session. I have 3 pages long notes. I really appreciate it. So
I didn't
my name
talk
is.
too fast. Sometimes I can talk really fast, so I just trying to cram it all in. So I'm glad.
It was perfect. I just had to type really fast. So I'm one of the co-founders of Jam. We're an early stage startup. We're kind of getting to the point where we're getting pulled into the pricing discussions by customers. And one of the things that you mentioned earlier about pricing was finding what your customers value and charge based on that. So not necessarily seat, could be storage, could be something else. So our product has a lot of different features. So from our perspective, it seems like there's value in a lot of different directions. But have you found any sort of exercise that internally teams can do to find out what actually your customers value and what you can charge them on?
Yeah. So the best advice I can give you is it'll feel a little risky, is find a prospect that you can build total trust with and bring them inside the tent. You need somebody, I mean, you can even, if you get that vibe from them that they're trustworthy, it's incredibly powerful to say, listen, because they know how early stage you are. They know you're figuring it out. There's not any real, like, we go through these conversations and we pretend to all play this role, but they know, right? And so if there's somebody who you can feel very trusted and say, hey, we want to, partner with you. We're going to give you massive discounts, but we need this from you. Because the thing when you're really early stages, you do want to trade in kind. The money isn't necessarily the most important thing. For you right now, it sounds like information is the most important thing. So if you can find 1 prospect, 2 prospects where you can have them sign, like, of course, the most ironclad NDA you've ever crafted, right? But if you can bring them inside the tent and give them something, give the product for free, right? The early days customers are not who are going to, that's not the revenue that makes your company great, right? Right now, information is more important to you. So that's what I would do. I would find those people that I really get that vibe from and bring them fully inside the tent and ask them, how much would you pay for this? That's actually, now I'm kind of favoring this idea of just give them a year for free if you can afford it. And is that
Super
okay
helpful.
to say as like the
Yes, that's
as
good.
the investor?
Yeah, I mean ask. I think that's excellent, and to the extent you can instrument, but it's so hard early to instrument. It's awesome. Good. Well, thank you so much, Mo. And we'll bring and well, Ian's coming up to the green room. There's a quick another question that came in the chat, which we hear a lot, which is when you're hiring for salespeople, how much does domain expertise matter versus just sales experience in general?
Okay, so this is like one of the questions I love because I'm hiring like crazy myself. I am a firm believer that you can teach anybody who's smart enough anything, domain wise. And so I want the DNA. I want the DNA of growth mindset. I want a certain level of that they've showed success. Like I don't want to have somebody come in and learn everything about how to do a sale, right? Want some experience. But I came into Fable with no domain expertise, but a very strong passion for learning about what they do and really loving the mission they're on. And I'm hiring tons of people who have no domain expertise because we can teach anybody anything. And again, like just the DNA is the thing to probe for. And every company is different. Like, again, I think growth mindset is something probably universal across everybody who's attending today. But, you could have to know things about Kubernetes that's like essential for your business. Maybe that is like some niche domain expertise that somebody needs. But again, I think you can teach anything.
Wonderful. Okay, and let's bring Ian up.
Hey, how's it going?
Hey, how are you?
I'm good. Wonderful to meet you. Firstly, I'm Ian. I'm the CEO of a company called Ramani. I'm blown away by this talk. Thank you so much for making the time. Our head of customer success actually in the room. So, first question is how does working remotely impact customer success, and should customer success work remotely? And then a second question, sorry, I'm sneaking in too, is that one pager that you put together with your company, with your team. For your customers, what does it look like? What's in it, and how do you? I imagine it's like, what are your customers' objectives, and how do you help them get there? How do you get those before so you can put together that one pager?
Okay, those are great questions. Okay, so let me just make sure I take a note here and then success plans. Okay, so remote work. We are in a world where I think almost everything can be remote. It creates new challenges for leadership of how do you stitch people together? How do you then create culture and community around that? We are a remote first company and we always will be. It's regardless of COVID, because our mission is to make digital products more accessible to people who live with disabilities. So we do that in a couple ways. I won't go into the Fable pitch, but we would not be walking our own talk or drinking our own champagne if we weren't remote first. We have staff who live with disabilities and their commute is a hill they should not have to climb. So we are remote first. So we do things with remote work like lots of essential meetings, which means not that many meetings. So we stitch ourselves together every Monday morning. We have a coffee rev up, revenue. It's supposed to be punny, but we all just show up, cup of coffee across all our time zones. Just hang out. What are we excited for in the week? What are we nervous about for the week? It could be personal, it could be professional, but just take moments to really build up those relationships, which we've all learned in the last 2 years can be remote. Does that help with that answer before I move to your second question? Okay, great. Success plans, super, super simple. Okay. And this is my pitch of why you want leadership if you can find somebody who can span the entire customer journey, your sellers, when they are selling the deal, should capture the objectives. The sellers need to know why the prospect is thinking of buying, right? And so we talk about pain points and all of that. And that's like kind of old school and still important, but the pain is around some business objective that isn't being achieved. So we start talking about other language like, what is your success criteria? What would you dream would be the outcomes of engaging with us? The sellers themselves, as AEs in the front of the kind of new logo sale, they should start to collect that information. If you use a CRM like HubSpot, easily can put notes in there and tag them and really like label the heck out of it so it's easy to extract. Then when we do the handoff from sales to CSM, we do, and I've done this at Seal, I've done this at Fable, we do what's called the day one meeting. The renewal starts the day that the contract is signed. So we think of that day one meeting of all that knowledge that happened during the sales process needs to land in the mind of the CSM, including any handoff on objectives, or if they didn't succeed in getting those objectives, the CSM needs to go into that kickoff call saying the most important thing is that I know what you want to achieve in this first year. The footnote on this is if you're doing something new, your customers will not know how to answer that. You will have to guide them. And that's when we get into like this really juicy and incredibly high impact work of customer success, because you're going to become the guide. Well, we know that I'll just use Fable as an example. We know that our products are inaccessible, but I don't know what I can achieve in the first year. So our CSMs can come in as the experts and say, well, given where you are, let's focus on this one part of your digital product set. Let's focus on the key flows like password recovery. Every time you do an update to your software, you have to make sure that that password recovery workflow remains accessible. And so we guide them to some real pillars of what are your objectives for this first year. So the success plan, that one pager, has a summary of kind of why they bought, right? You started with us in 2022, and here's why you bought. And then maybe 3 or 4 in another box down here of the objectives. These are the objectives. And then, depending on how your business goes, likely you want to have some responsible parties listed. And that's it. And then as you can have like a progress bar, like, hey, we're all starting, so everything's at like 0%. You can create some really cool visuals around it, but you want to keep it that high level, because often we get lost in the weeds. We lose that high level, and then it comes up to renewal time, and everybody's like, so wait, why would they renew with us? Like, what did we achieve? And then there's all this busy work that's like so painful and so time demanding if we had just properly, methodically progressed that success plan.
Awesome.
I hope
Great.
that's helpful.
Thank you.
Great. Thanks, Ian. And let's bring up Siamak from Boston, from Africa to the East Coast.
Hello. Hi, Siamak Bardo, co-founder, CEO of LabVivo. Thank you both for an amazing discussion, extremely insightful. Thank you. My company builds a platform. It is a marketplace platform that is primarily used by life science companies, pharma. We've kind of been having a great success from the customer side, and the product has a great traction within our customers. At the same time, being an early stage startup, we are struggling with building processes, building operations that can really help and feed that exponential growth. So my question to you is, how do you really prioritize scaling sales versus building internal processes and operations that can really help sustain that sales process and sales growth?
And so the processes, my pleasure. Thanks for your question. So the processes that you're talking about, are they around capturing kind of the sales process or the post-sales kind of customer execution?
All of the above.
All of it?
From pre to customer success to post-sales customer service, and really help building a maturity in those processes, while at the same time you're trying to grow the business and build on your financial success.
Yeah. Building out the sales processes is much more of kind of a known quantity, right? So understanding what, again, going back to those acronyms, like what are the requirements for a deal to progress? Do you have sellers and layers of managers already, or do you have, like, what's your sales structure right now for people?
Currently, we have sales folks that are focusing on one side of the marketplace, on the buyer side, one on the sell side. But we have just built a customer service and customer success team as well to support that.
Great. So, having the visibility of what your sellers, again, like what are the requirements for them? How do you keep the hygiene clean? One thing we do is like we just make ourselves do these things that we know are setting the business up for success. So for example, we'll have like a once a month hygiene cleanup in our CRM, where things that are being dropped, like the pain point, like the things that really matter in the deal, we make sure that all of those fields are filled in. And that kind of indicates what are the first principles. The first principles are you have to know, and this can just be like a one-day workshop. We all sit down, whoever in your team is like essential to this, and you identify what are the mission critical moments and data points that we have to capture, and only police those things, right? So if something is a nice to have, if you're trying to just create a repeatable process and making sure you can scale it, you've got to let some things fall to the wayside. The big Achilles heel at the point in your growth right now is boiling the ocean, trying to do too much. You want to keep data clean so that you don't end up like many companies I've worked before where it's like, oh, those first 500 customers, we can't pay attention to any of their data. It was too fast and loose. But just put some thought to it. And it's not rocket science, right? All of this has been done, rinse, repeat. But the most important thing is don't have too many data points. Make sure you understand what are the most important gates to progress deals, because if you don't have those gates in place and you're selling the wrong people, your swim lanes will be deteriorated. The swim lane idea, I think, might be really helpful to you. This idea that if we go outside our swim lane, things break. If we go outside our swim lane, we can't scale. If we go outside our swim lane, we paint ourselves in a corner with customization. So understanding, again, that swim lane, first thing, sales process. What's mission critical? How do we police it? Are there too many data points here? Really be brutal. You're now building that post-sales org too. Same thing, customer centricity, right? What matters? If they don't do this as a new customer, they will fail. If they don't do this as a new customer, not a big deal. Understanding what the moments are that are mission critical to getting them up the onboarding curve and into the value delivery stage, identify those, figure out how to track them. We do a hack in our CRM right now. Very quickly, we're going to want CSM software, something like a Churn Zero or Gainsight, whatever you might want to choose. Again, orchestrate it to not boil the ocean. What are the absolute critical things? If this doesn't happen, they fail. If this does happen, they succeed. So just put your amazing mind together with your leadership, carve out a day, and it's the only thing you do. And it should be something you can focus in on. I hope that's helpful.
Great. Thank you. Brilliant.
Great. Good seeing you. Okay. And Maggie, and we'll end on time. So we'll be very crisp with Maggie's question.
Yeah. Hi, Maggie. Thank you so much, Annie and Wynne. It's so pleasure to learn so much things from this this lesson. We are running a startup. I mean, in the life science or a database, a B2B SaaS database for life science, and I'm responsible for selling the product into China market. So I have a very, very important question to our team is that how can we quantify the value of our product that can bring to the clients? Is there any methodology like conjoint, maybe the conjoint analysis, or maybe we can schedule an interview for the customers to ask, okay, how much are you going to, or are you willing to pay the most? Is there something methodology that we can use to quantify the product, the value? And also,
that's good. Let's just in the interest of time, how do we quantify value?
Yeah, so that's really important. When we want to be able to prove our value, it isn't, thank you very much for bringing this up. It's not necessarily just about those objectives, but how those objectives translate into ROI. So there's a few ways to do this. So there could be the time saved, and we love to translate time saved by role into a quantifiable number. So an example, at Seal Software, if you used our software, we saved X number of hours for your legal staff, and the legal staff costs on average this much per hour, and you can quantify an ROI in that manner. Is it a replacement? Are you saving them money now? They don't have to buy if they're going to use your database. What are they saving in server costs? The most important thing, and what I think you're probably sensing from this already, is that the last mile for many things with your customers is based on your relationship, because they have to give you the data. When we look at ROI, when we looked at outcomes, a lot of our objectives, we can stop at knowing that we delivered it via our service, our software, etc., but only they take it the final mile to making it live in their company. So things like my example just right now, I don't know how much their legal staff costs on average. I can estimate how many hours I've saved them. So making sure you're very clear with them, these objectives, to translate them into value, it's usually pretty simple math, but to get the data on what that value could be measured at, you have to know what you're asking for and get that often at least half the puzzle from the customer.
Wonderful. Well, thank you, Maggie, for the question. And Wynne, thank you so much for your time and expertise and stories. And really so appreciate it. And I will say that if anyone needs accessibility solutions, and everyone does for their services, please contact Wynne at Fable.
Thanks, Anne. Thanks, everyone. It was so much fun.